Welcome back to another episode of Blueprint to Your Health. I'm your host, Anna K. Simpson. Did you know that the human heart is only the size of a fist? Nonetheless, it is the strongest muscle in the human body. This is why cardiovascular diseases such as stroke are especially threatening to our health. According to the World Health Organization, globally, coronary disease and stroke causes 13 million deaths every year. We speak with internist and wellness specialist Dr. Kathy Ann Pate Robinson to hear more about stroke detection and prevention. First, here's a trivia question. Your trivia question is, what percentage of all deaths worldwide can be linked to non-communicable or lifestyle diseases? Is it A, 25%, B, 70%, C, 50%, or D, 45%? The answer will be revealed when we return and have our discussion with Dr. Kathy Ann Pate Robinson. We know of the different cardiovascular diseases such as heart disease or heart attack, but tell us, what exactly is a stroke?
A stroke is essentially the death of some of your brain cells because they didn't receive enough blood supply and oxygen and nutrients to keep them alive. Your brain cells are very specific in terms of the nutrients that they consume. So you have to have glucose present in your circulation at all times or the brain does not get fed. And apart from that, your brain also depends on circulation to carry oxygen constantly. So the brain isn't one of those organs that has stores of glucose or oxygen. I mean, we don't really store oxygen per se, but glucose is stored in many other parts of the body, but not for the brain. So, and the brain doesn't use any other form of energy other than glucose. So if your circulation is interrupted for a few minutes, then you start to have brain death. Usually 4 to 5 minutes, you start to have death of some of the brain cells. And we don't regenerate brain cells. So when they die, we have permanent loss of a cell that has a particular function. If you lose enough of a group of cells that perform a function together, then that entire function is gone.
Are there different types of stroke?
There are usually two main types of stroke that are recognized, although from a scientific perspective there may be smaller subgroups. But in general, we talk about strokes as either being ischemic or due to circulation blockage, or hemorrhagic due to circulation bleeding. So if you have a blood vessel rupture or pop, because, for example, your pressure was very high at that moment and the blood vessel couldn't stay together and it popped, then that would cause a bleeding stroke. Whereas for most people, we tend to have what we call ischemic strokes, where the blood vessel is blocked by a clot. Now, some sources will separate the type of blockage stroke into ischemic stroke and TIA, or transient ischemic attack. I don't really consider them separate categories, but a TIA, or transient ischemic attack, is a stroke that almost happened. So you had a temporary blockage of a blood vessel with a clot that stopped the blood flow through that blood vessel to that part of the brain, but the clot moved on and the circulation was restored. And when that happens, we call that a transient ischemic attack.
What happens in the body when we're experiencing a stroke?
In the brain, with a stroke, because the circulation is blocked for a period of time, whether it's blocked because of a clot or whether it's blocked because of bleeding and loss of continued blood flow to that area, then because of the loss of oxygen and subsequently nutrients, the part of the brain that is supplied by that blood vessel starts to starve for oxygen, for nutrients, and then because the cells don't have the ability to starve for too long, 4 to 5 minutes later, you start to have cell death. So then in the center of the area of blood supply that is not happening, that center set of cells that is in the center of that area, those cells die first. If the blood supply is not returned or supplemented to that area, then you can get the cells around also starting to die, the ones that have a little blood supply but not enough. And so one of the reasons stroke is so important is that if in recognizing stroke rather is so important is that when you recognize it early and you can do something to return circulation to that part of the brain, you can save cells and you can then save function. Because if you can't regenerate those brain cells and you would lose that function permanently, to be able to prevent those cells from dying, you regain that function or you maintain that function. So for example, somebody who has a stroke to a part of the brain that deals with movement of their right arm, if they get to the hospital quickly enough and they are able to get whatever type of therapy they need to return circulation, and there are two main ways. You have medications in some cases, but if it is not safe to give those medications to break down the clots, you also have a procedure that you can do to physically remove the blockage. Now, if you can get that kind of procedure done quickly enough, which is usually within 3 to 4.5 hours for the average case, then you can go from having a dead arm to having a fully functional arm by the next day or within that same day. The problem comes, especially here in Jamaica, that a lot of people have a watch and wait approach. So, you know, I feel a little tingling or numbness or half of my face doesn't feel right, but, you know, I'm just not feeling well. I'm going to sleep it off, and when I wake up, everything will be okay. Or they don't really recognize, maybe sometimes a person is an older person who is not as fully functional in general, and you know, they think, well, it will get better, or they're afraid to go to the doctor, so then they may wait too long to come to the hospital for help. So then when you get to a hospital and you go to the emergency room, if it's too late, then the primary procedures that would return circulation are not really an option as an urgent measure to return full function. Sometimes, in some cases, you can still do a manual removal of the blockage for up to 24 hours or sometimes even 48 hours and return some function, because sometimes a blockage continues to have ongoing death of a larger and larger area. And so sometimes, because there are still changes occurring, late intervention in some people still returns some function or prevents the loss of further function. But in general, they would have already permanently lost something. And that can be different types of function. So that's what's happening in the brain. But when you think about what's happening in the body, when I have a stroke and a part of my circulation gets blocked off, then the part of the brain that is affected determines what function I lose. So I mentioned that you can lose the function of your entire arm, and the arm goes dead. So that dead arm could be dead from the perception of pain and sensation. So you touch it and I don't know that you're touching me, but I can move it. Or it could be I can't move it at all, but I can feel when you touch me. Or it could be both. I can't move it and I can't feel anything. But that is with your limbs. Right. If you're looking at some other areas of the brain, you can lose your ability to speak. So a lot of people are familiar with stroke causing slurred speech. Yes. The tongue is heavy, they can't form the words easily. And some people have had relatives who have strokes where they can talk, they can move, but what they're talking or saying doesn't make sense. And that can be two different types of disconnect in the brain, where it's affecting one of your language centers, and either you're hearing the words that I'm saying to you, but you're not understanding them. So then when you respond, you're responding to what you think you heard, but what you think you heard is not what I actually said, because your brain isn't processing that connection with the language. And then you have the other side of things where you're hearing what I'm saying, but when you try to speak, what comes out is not what you intend.
Stroke is caused by a disruption of blood supply to the brain. What are implications of experiencing a stroke?
The long-term effects depend a lot on how you manage a stroke. So if you get what we call your revascularization therapy, meaning we are reopening the circulation to that area. We call that revascularization. Okay. So if you get, whether you get the medication version through the vein or whether you get the actual physical, put a device up and open up the circulation. So if you get revascularization early, you may temporarily lose function and permanently lose function, but you regain the temporary part because that part of the brain wasn't fully dead yet. Okay. And so it was able to recover. And in cases like that, then you may start out with maybe a complete one side of you dead, okay, and move forward with return of maybe 50, 75, or even 100% of the function of that side, depending on how quickly the treatment occurred and whether the treatment was fully effective, which varies for a lot of factors. But apart from, and so that really has an impact on my function as a person, because if I have a stroke today and I lose the function of half of my body, I can't walk, can't go to work, I may need assistance for regular activities of daily living. So then I may need assistance to bathe, to go to the bathroom, to brush my teeth. I may not be able to brush my hair, put on my clothes. I may or may not be able to communicate effectively, depending on whether my speech is affected. So then I am now a burden to myself and to my family. And sometimes I don't have any family. And then maybe it's a kind neighbor who is helping to take care of me, or the people in my church say, you know, we can't allow this person to suffer, and they're going to help. But I may not have really had any savings to continue my health care, and healthcare is not necessarily free or cheap. So then I may have expenses that I can't cover, and I'm depending on a Good Samaritan to help me to survive. If I get all the care that I need, then I'll get back most of my, and quickly enough, I'll get back most of my function. I will do rehabilitation therapy with doctors and physiotherapists, and I will retrain my body and a different area of my brain to take up some of the functions that I lost. And then I may regain some of the functions that I lost. Not that I necessarily regained the nerves that I lost, but sometimes you can, through physiotherapy and rehabilitation treatments, you can retrain your body and your brain to function, or to at least partially recover some of the function that you lost by utilizing alternate nerves in the brain that are linked to that area but would not necessarily have had to carry out that function before. Right. So your brain can remodel to some extent, but sometimes that's not possible because of how much damage occurred, or what size or part of the brain actually got damaged, and that may not be possible for rehabilitation to work, at least to achieve the goals that you would hope to have. But sometimes it really makes a very big difference. And even when it can't help you to regain your full function, then you can at least regain part of your function. And that might mean the difference between being able to feed yourself and dress yourself or not, or being able to speak and express yourself or not.
When someone is having a stroke, time is of the essence. How do we know when someone is having a stroke?
The symptoms are varied depending on which part of the brain is affected. So things that are common, people may have slurred speech, or they may have sudden dizziness, or they may complain of numbness to a part of the body, or suddenly what they're holding is falling out of their hand. So the cup just fell out of my hand and I can't pick it up. So it depends really where it's affected. It can be sudden loss of vision in one or both eyes. So you're watching TV and all of a sudden you can't see. It can be something that simple and that strange. So it really depends on where in the brain is affected. You can have any sudden loss of function and it may not be complete. For some people, like the vision goes for a second and then it comes back and think, okay, well, that was weird, but it's okay now. So they keep going and then tomorrow it happens again and maybe this time permanently. And what they had was a partial blockage that then became a complete blockage because they didn't really check it out because it was so short and it went away. So then I'm okay. And we tend to take these little signs very lightly. It's similar to what happens in a heart attack. The same way I said time is brain, for a heart attack, time is muscle. The faster you get intervention to return circulation to damaged heart muscle is the faster you are able, and the more you are able to return function. Because losing the heart muscle is similar to losing the brain. You get permanent loss of function, which impacts your whole life for the rest of your years. So when you look at how you deal with a stroke or a heart attack, it means being very suspicious of the changes that occur. Okay, I'm having numbness that I didn't have before, and it's not that I was holding something so tight that, okay, maybe the nerves got a little squeezed, or even so, this is unusual for me. I don't usually have a problem with these two fingers, and all of a sudden these two fingers are numb and it's not going away. Well, maybe I should check it out. Stroke doesn't usually give you pain because the brain doesn't have pain receptors. So even though you could imagine that your brain cells are screaming, you can't hear them because there's nothing to sense pain in the brain tissue itself. When you get a headache, it's not because you had death of brain cells that gave you a headache. You probably got a headache because the meninges, the membrane surrounding the brain and the brain fluid, were stretched. And the stretch receptors say, no, something is wrong here. And so you feel pain, so you get a headache. Migraine can be like that. The vessels open up and it stretches the tissue around it. And that stretch is interpreted as pain. And that pain is not in the brain itself. But you get it as a headache and say, okay, well, maybe something's going on in my head. And you think maybe brain, but the brain is not going to tell you I have pain. The brain is just going to give you loss of function. There's many occasions where even for heart attacks, somebody just dies and there is nothing you can do. And sometimes it has to do with just how big a part of the circulation was interrupted. So if I interrupt a larger vessel with a clot and I block off the circulation to 3/4 of my brain, then by the time you get me to hospital, I'm not alive anymore. Even if I'm still breathing, which can happen. The functions of breathing and some of the other automatic functions like the heart beating happen in the brainstem, which is actually outside of your skull in your neck, all right, or at the base of the skull. So if I lose most of the function, the top of my brain, but my brainstem is still getting circulation, it will still tell me to breathe, it will still tell my heart to beat in some people, not in everybody, but in some people that will still happen. And then you have a situation where somebody is brain dead. You will never get a useful person back. But they look alive. They're breathing. They are having a heartbeat. And that freaks a lot of people out. Because then if this is my loved one, I'm going to say, but they're breathing. Their heart is beating. Why aren't you doing more? And sometimes the brain is gone. But the automatic centers that just do the automatic basic to keep the body going, they are still functioning, but they're functioning on autopilot.
We know that blockage or rupture of a blood vessel causes a stroke. Is there a possibility to recognize this early?
Yes, some of the time. So if a stroke takes a little while to occur, it's not a fast process. You have a small blood vessel affected first, then you may get small signs that if left untreated might progress, but if you recognize them early, you can intervene quickly. So for example, you can have numbness, tingling, pins and needles, or funny or abnormal sensation in any part of your body. You can have a little heaviness of the tongue or a little slurred speech, or you may have sudden, whether temporary or not, loss of vision in one eye or both eyes. For some people, a seizure might happen, and a fit where they're jerking and they're not fully aware. For some people, the seizure is a partial seizure where they are still partially aware of what's going on, although they may not be in full control of all their parts. And you may have sudden weakness of a hand, a foot. When these things happen, then that's a sign that you need to seek care immediately, because it could be a stroke, and then the earlier you get care, the better your outcome.
What are the risk factors in experiencing a stroke?
There are different types of risk factors. So there are the risk factors that lead to damage because they're diseases, and then there are the risk factors that lead to damage because they're habits. So if I eat a lot of greasy, fried, and fatty foods and high cholesterol foods, I am asking for my circulation to slowly become damaged over time, and I will at some point be at quite a lot of risk of developing high blood pressure, maybe even diabetes. My cholesterol may become permanently elevated. I will potentially have a risk for kidney damage because of circulation damage to the kidneys itself. I may be at risk of having damage to my vision, my hearing, because of circulation damage. If you have diabetes, damage to the circulation happens more rapidly. If you have diabetes and high blood pressure, then they multiply the damage that each one does. So you have something called metabolic syndrome, which is a term that hasn't always been very well defined, but basically it's saying if you have metabolic syndrome, you're a person who has uncontrolled blood pressure, you have uncontrolled sugar levels in your blood, you have overweight or obesity, you may or may not have high cholesterol, you have multiple metabolic and circulatory risk factors that put you at risk of early death, of early damage, and of loss of function in many different ways, which includes strokes and heart attacks, includes circulation problems to the legs where people sometimes lose a limb. It includes damage to the kidneys, damage to your vision. All of that comes with some of these lifestyle related diseases or chronic non-communicable diseases, because you can't hug somebody and give them obesity. But if you are obese, meaning that your body mass index is very high, it's over 30, so your weight is too much for your height from a health perspective, you're more likely to get high blood pressure, you're more likely to get diabetes, you're more likely to have kidney disease, even without diabetes or high blood pressure. And in Jamaica, hypertension or high blood pressure is the most common cause of kidney failure. Diabetes comes next. But obesity by itself, without those two friends, can cause kidney failure. So all of these lifestyle related diseases, they have a common factor, and that is damage to the circulation. And it has to do with what we put into our bodies and what we do with our bodies. So if I'm a very healthy person, and that means I drink water regularly, so I stay well hydrated, I'm getting enough rest most of the time, I exercise regularly, preferably every day, so I'm very physically active, I eat as healthy as I can, so I'm not eating a lot of fried, greasy, fatty foods, I don't consume a lot of sugars, sweets, or baked goods, and my meals are balanced, so they have protein and starch and vegetables, some amount of fats or oils because those are necessary. I have vegetable, I have fruit, and I am taking care of myself and avoiding certain bad habits like drinking alcohol and smoking, which are very damaging things in different ways. Then I am giving myself the best chance to maintain my full function, my good health, my ability to take care of what I need to take care of every day for many years to come. It doesn't mean that I'm at zero risk of having a problem. I know people who they are healthier than I've ever seen. I want to be like them. They are keeping it together. They're doing everything they can do, and they still have a heart attack or they still die from a stroke. For those people, they had a lot of risk factors that maybe we weren't aware of, other than the habits that they had. Their lifestyle was healthy, but maybe their genetic makeup put them at such a great risk that their healthy lifestyle allowed them to live longer than they would have. But sometimes things happen suddenly as well. And so you can't plan for, I'm going to die today or I'm going to die tomorrow. But if I maintain a healthy lifestyle, then maybe I won't get sick as early or as easily, and maybe I will maintain my function for 10, 20, 50 more years than I would if I didn't.
It's always a pleasure sitting with you, Dr. Pate Robinson. Thank you so much. We go for a break. When we return, the answer to your trivia. You're watching Blueprint to Your Health.
Our slogan says we are the people's station, and for more than 10 years, PBCJ has been providing unique content to this growing market. Let us show you how we can serve you. We are small compared to our competitors, but it's our size that gives us the ability to dedicate ourselves to our clients. We move your project from concept to completion, keeping our activities in-house so we can make decisions in a timely and efficient manner. We have a creative, energetic, and youthful team ready to take your ideas to the next level. So what can we do for you? PBCJ has mastered the art of feature presentations, studio interviews, and PSAs. We also stand ready to create content for your social media platforms and make your message accessible anywhere, anytime. We also provide streaming for your conferences, seminars, and workshops. And guess what? You don't have to break the bank, because our fees are some of the most competitive in the market. And just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we air it free. You heard right. We air it free for you. So call the PBCJ at 876-754-7225 or email us at production@pbcjamaica.org. We are waiting to serve you.
Your trivia question for the day was, what percentage of all deaths worldwide can be linked to non-communicable or lifestyle diseases? Is it A, 25%, B, 70%, C, 50%, or D, 45%? The answer is B, 70%. According to the World Health Organization, Non-communicable diseases, including heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, and chronic lung disease, are collectively responsible for almost 70% of all deaths worldwide. Almost 3/4 of all non-communicable disease deaths, or 82% of the 16 million people who died prematurely or before reaching 70 years of age, occur in low and middle income countries like Jamaica. There you have it. We just spoke to Dr. Paige Robinson about stroke detection, prevention, and other cardiovascular diseases. I'm your host, Anna K. Simpson, and this is Blueprint to Your Health, tips and tools for a healthier you. Thanks for watching.